Mr. President, we thank the chairmanship for promptly convening a meeting in connection with the Israeli strike on Qatar at the request of Algeria, supported by Pakistan, Somalia, France, and the United Kingdom. We are grateful to UN Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing. We have carefully studied the position of the Qatari side set out in the letter circulated on September 9th. We are confident that the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Qatar will give detailed assessments of what happened. We welcome your participation in the meeting, Mr. Prime Minister, as well as the participation of Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi and Dr. Anwar Gargash, as well as other participants. Mr. President, the Russian Federation strongly condemns the Israeli attack on a residential complex in Doha on 9 September, which was declared to be the target of high-ranking members of the leadership of the Palestinian Hamas movement who were there.
As a result of this outrageous attack, according to preliminary information, 6 people were killed, including an employee of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Qatar, and citizens of the emirate were injured.
It is extremely worrying that the Israeli Air Force struck a quarter of the Qatari capital, where foreign embassies are located. For example, the Russian diplomatic mission is located 600 meters from the site of the attack. Residential buildings, busy highways, as well as several schools and kindergartens. In other words, the victims of this massive air raid, which was carried out in the middle of the working day at 15:45 local time, could have been a much larger number of innocent people, including our fellow diplomats, their wives and children. Gross violation of the sovereignty of the state, as well as the creation of a serious threat to the security of civilians, cannot be justified. We fully share the UN Secretary General's assessment of the inadmissibility of Israeli attacks on Qatar, which constitute an encroachment on the territorial integrity of an independent state. We share the Secretary General's words about Qatar's positive role in its desire to put an end to the war in the Gaza Strip, which has been going on for almost 2 years. The Hamas leadership, according to incoming information, was ready to conclude such agreements, and it was at the time of the rocket attack on September 9th that the leadership of the movement discussed in Doha another proposal of U.S. Special Envoy Stephen Witkoff. Thus, the blow was dealt not only to Qatar as a sovereign state and not involved in the Arab-Israeli conflict, but also to the efforts of the mediators as a whole, to the very possibility of a diplomatic solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It is obvious that the Israeli incursion will have the most serious consequences, both for the already terrible situation in Gaza and for the security of the vast Middle East region.
Mr. President, unfortunately, what happened 2 days ago is not an accident, but a natural consequence of the absolute impunity of Jerusalem, which over and over again tests the boundaries of what is permissible and discovers new frontiers for itself, using Washington's international diplomatic cover. Moreover, the implementation of Israel's arbitrary military actions is camouflaged under slogans about imaginary threats to the security of the Jewish state from the so-called Seven Fronts. We all remember very well how on the night of July 31, 2024, Ismail Haniyeh, who was then the head of the Hamas Politburo, was killed in Tehran. At that time, the leader of the Palestinian movement was in the Islamic Republic at an official invitation to attend the inauguration ceremony of the elected president of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian. At that time, the political assassination was committed with the same goal, to deal a serious blow to the proxy negotiations between Hamas and Israel, aimed at a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The strike on Qatar, where a large American military base is located, was a fundamentally new round of regional escalation. If the Israelis are willing to eliminate their political opponents in a state that is very close to their main ally, what stops them from doing the same in any other capital in the world? Why, in principle, conduct scrupulous negotiations on a ceasefire and the release of hostages if you can simply put a bullet in the forehead to your interlocutor? Mr. President, the vicious practice of eliminating prominent political and military figures is not just a crime. It is an outrage on the principles of civilized interaction between states, which creates the risk of uncontrolled escalation. We call on Jerusalem to abandon its reckless, aggressive actions that provoke a spiral of violence in the region. All members of the Council should send a similar signal. It seems that it is already obvious to everyone that Washington's declared policy of so-called quiet diplomacy is not only failing to produce results, but is also fraught with new high-profile explosions in an atmosphere heated to the limit. And it is precisely by relying on this policy that the U.S. delegation has been blocking any efforts at the Security Council for almost 2 years now. It is difficult to say what other thunder must strike for Washington to finally realize that multilateral diplomacy within the Council is not just not an obstacle, but the only extremely important tool in the current conditions that is necessary to turn the tide on the ground. In this regard, we support the mood of the 10 non-permanent members of the Council to promote a draft Security Council resolution on the situation in Gaza, with an emphasis on the demand that Israel lift all restrictions on the supply of humanitarian aid to the enclave. We hope that this product will also include a call for a ceasefire, without which it is simply impossible to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza. We are convinced that the adoption of the resolution will be an important and effective measure towards alleviating the suffering of the Palestinian people. Mr. President, in conclusion, we would like to once again express our solidarity with the leadership and people of Qatar, who have come under fire from the militant military and political cabinet of Israel. Detailed consolidated Russian-Arab assessments of this arbitrary military action and the events in the Middle East in general were made today in Sochi following the Russia-Gulf Cooperation Council ministerial meeting. The Security Council also adopted a statement to the press on the Doha strikes. Unfortunately, it does not reach the point where everything necessary is reflected in it. Not all things are called by their proper names. Thank you for your attention.